What's going on, everybody? Hope everybody's having a great week. My name is Jeremiah, and I'm here, as always, with my beautiful wife, Ashley.
Hey.
And you're listening to the Hill Shadows podcast. We cover all things of the supernatural and paranormal. If you guys like that kind of content, please hit the subscribe button and don't miss any of our weekly uploads. So, how are you doing this week?
Good.
You're good.
Yeah.
We missed our podcast last week. I'm disappointed in us. We've been on such a roll.
Oh, we did?
We did. Yeah, you don't remember?
Yeah,
like
I
had
actually.
A show in Louisville.
That's right.
That I did not make it to.
Yeah, that's right.
So, yeah.
Oops.
Yeah, with
Apologies.
Yeah, we won't let that happen again. It was just a pretty crazy weekend, and
We also had to work too, I'm pretty sure.
We did have to work. So, yeah, there were numerous obstacles just preventing the stars from aligning correctly. So,
Yep.
But we're back this week, and I think we got some really cool content to cover. Just researching things from our neck of the woods, so to say, in Kentucky. I found some pretty terrifying things that come out of the Red River Gorge region, which I've actually spent some time camping down there, and it's a very creepy place. I've never seen anything scary down there, but after you hear these stories I have, you might think twice before you go camping there.
Right.
And also,
Never camped there.
When it comes to stories, if you guys have any stories that you would like to share, you can send those to us at hillshadowsky@yahoo.com. And we'd love to share your email, or you can just contact us, say hey or whatever. We'd love to hear from you guys. But I'll get into this story, and it's kind of interesting. I have a couple of different stories, and I kind of they kind of go hand in hand, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And first, I'll just go over this in the order that I stumbled across this. It makes the most sense to me personally like that. And I'll go ahead and say that all of this is coming from a Reddit post that is under the subreddit of Backwoods Creepy. And this post was by a user. The OP was named Silly Siler, and this was posted 3 years ago. And somebody really had this experience at Red River Gorge, and I believe they said this happened in November. I guess that would have been 2018, 2019. Who knows? I don't know if you guys might know anything about this. Maybe you could contact us or contact the proper authorities, Anyway, I'll get into this story. Is titled Something Horrible at Red River Gorge. Red River Gorge is a beautiful and huge park full of wildlife, rock climbing, waterfalls, dense forest, gorges, and beautiful views. This is a place that feels truly isolated, disconnected from the rest of the world. One fall evening, my boyfriend and I decided to go camping at the gorge. We found a campground that was as backwoods as possible. Sites were spread far from each other. Our site was on the edge of a very steep drop-off. We arrived at sunset and quickly got to setting up camp. By the time we were fully set up, the sun had set, and we began to make a fire. About 20 minutes into relaxing by the fire, we began to hear howling that didn't sound too far away. We were both freaked out by the realization there were wolves nearby, but we tried not to overreact and continued to sit by our fire. 10 minutes later, I started to hear a faint yelling about 15 feet away, past the cliff's edge. I told him to be quiet and listen, and we both froze out of fear. A woman was screaming now. I couldn't make out any words at this point, but it was a deep, guttural shriek, a noise that I've never heard a person make in real life. Then I heard it. She was screaming, "Help me, somebody, please. Oh my God, someone please help me." And repeating this over and over, howling at the top of her lungs. I was terrified. She could have been turned around in the dark and fallen off the cliff. She could have been attacked by the wolves, a bear, bitten by a snake. At this point, we both sprint to my car, frantically climbed down inside and locked the doors. I tried calling the police, but had no service. I threw the car in reverse and sped down the dirt road to find anyone that could help. The shrieks continued. I didn't make it far before coming across a group of 3 young men standing on the edge of the forest. I slowed down and cracked my windows, still hearing the woman begging for help, and asked the men if they heard that. How could they not? I told them I heard a woman crying for help in the forest, and 2 of them went sprinting into the darkness of the forest without questioning me any further. The other one just stood by my car, assuring me he had no idea what was happening. While the 2 men were somewhere in the forest, I drove further down the dirt road until I found a spot to turn around. When I came back, the screaming had stopped, and the men were back by the side of the road. I slowed down and asked them where the woman was, and one of the men that had run into the woods answered, "Don't worry, it's funny actually. It was just a little kid at a campsite further down the trail. He was having a nightmare." I just said okay and drove away as quickly as possible. We left the campsite and went straight home. Once out of the woods, we called the local police station multiple times with no answer. I know it wasn't a child. I've never heard such a primal, fearful scream in my life. It makes my skin crawl and heart race just to think about it. What did those men get away with that night? What was I a witness to? I searched local news for weeks searching for some report detailing what this could have been and came across nothing. Also, I think it's important to note that this happened in early November last year, after the camping season was mostly over. We saw very few people during our time there, and I would think it would be assumed by most people that there won't be many people around at this time of year. So that's the first story I was reading. And that's quite a horrifying experience. I mean, that's
Yeah.
that's like somebody's worst nightmare just unfolding.
Yeah.
But then I was reading some comments to this, and I seen something that really got my attention. And I will just read this, entire comment, and this comment comes from a user by the name of KY-JA-KY. I don't exactly know how you would pronounce that, but it says, reading this, my gut says that those guys were with whoever was hurting that woman. Maybe like lookouts or something because she was being loud. But the reason I read this in the first place is because you say you were at the Red River Gorge. I've gone there countless times for almost 30 years now. And one time, I had the scariest experience of my life. And I look at nighttime a little different there now. Now that's the other story I'm going to share with you guys, but going on through this comment. What I saw was not human at all, but a big part of me believes it could look human if it wanted to. And I felt like it could have ripped me in half. Me and my husband both saw it, along with a friend I had at the time. We only saw that creature once, but multiple other times saw what we named pod people. And they're just people who aren't all there. They seem off in a way or don't respond to normal things. When you talk to these guys, how did they respond? Did they ever acknowledge hearing anything? And were you looking at them and hearing them at the same time? Trying to guess if they were ignoring or trying to possibly make you think you never heard it. Did the 2 take off running without saying anything, just turn and run? Still think maybe they were lookouts for something, but I feel if it were just another human, they'd be closer to it. The distance they kept is weird. And so this person has attached my encounter at Red River Gorge, and this is under the thread on Reddit titled "The Truth Is Here," and the title of this post is "Possible Wendigo Sighting RRG." And this is by the same user that responded in the comment that I'd just mentioned. So I'll read this. Okay, so I have no idea what we saw exactly that night. I have searched everywhere for sightings or even myths around the area we saw and have found nothing. If anyone has any idea what we saw, or even if anyone else has seen it, please let me know. My husband and I think it could be a Wendigo, but I don't know. I haven't heard anyone else say they've seen anything like it at Red River Gorge. I guess I want help figuring out what we saw and what to do. After the night I'm about to describe, but I think we've had some close encounters with it since. My friends and I go camping a lot, and my favorite place is in Red River Gorge, Kentucky. We go there often, and I've been ever since I was an infant. I'm 28 now, married with a kid, and still go. It's the closest place to where I live where you can see the Milky Way pretty much every night. It's perfect for stargazing, and I've seen a shooting star every clear night I've been there. When we go without our kids, we will night hike to a good lookout point and stargaze for hours. Our first experience as night hiking, we would go to trails we knew well and were used frequently during the day, ones with long fences and gazebo resting places. The most used trail is a trail in Natural Bridge State Park that leads up to the Natural Bridge. This trail is around 2 miles uphill depending on your starting point. I've done this trail every summer of my life and could do it blindfolded. It has wooden steps, carved rock steps, log handrails, multiple sitting points under a roof, trash cans, but after reaching the main trailhead it has no lights at all. It's used often, and while it is uphill the difficulty is low. As long as you have good grip on your shoes and water, you'll be fine. My friends have done it with me multiple times and are confident in it as well. Hiking this trail at night is not allowed, but it's the woods, and I've never really been one to care about closing times for the literal outside. When we used this main trail to hike to the top, we would park in a lot designated for the pool and Hoedown Island. You walk across the road that leads to the pool, and you're at the first trail marker. You go up the gravel for a while and pass the Natural Bridge State Park Lodge. There's a waterfall and some lights, so it was best to go fast and watch out for rangers that would tell us to leave. Then you walk across another road, and there's a mini shelter to sit on or a small rock wall to rest your legs. Then it's the beginning of the trail to the top. That night was weird to begin with. As soon as we started the hike, the clouds took over, and it appeared we'd been walking for nothing to even stargaze at. But we went anyways, just in case it cleared out by the time we got up there. In the beginning, it was just normal paranoia that was keeping us stressed and quiet, it seemed. You know you've reached the bottom of the bridge when you see a giant wall of limestone. During this time, there was a gazebo that sat to the right of this wall, and the trail continued and followed next to the wall. Where you come from is a fairly steep part of the trail, and the gazebo is welcomed. My husband, my best friend at the time, and I all sat on the gazebo steps. The bench is under a roof and even darker than the rest of the outside, so we just stayed on the steps, facing to where we are looking down the trail that follows the limestone wall. We each have a bright LED headlamp and a handheld flashlight. We don't usually look at each other when we night hike because the lights are so bright. We sit in a line like the Lord's Supper and walk in a line or staggered so we don't blind ourselves. It is after hours at this point. No ski lift rides had gone on for hours, and the rangers had already done their sweep and left right before we got out of the car and headed up. We left no time between them making sure the trail and top were clear and us starting our hike up. The ski lift takes you to the top, but there are workers that stay and do counts and only leave after it's clear. I guess I have to make these points because that's what I was thinking when what seemed out of nowhere, a girl with a headlamp begins to walk down the trail we are looking out at. She is in a sundress and flip-flops. The hike is uphill, and while it is a fairly easy hike, it is not easy with no water or real shoes. She'd have to have hiked up and down to this point with no food or water. Her light was bright, and when she reached where the trail turns from in front of the gazebo to down where we came from, she stopped. She just stood there straight on like how a human is presented in anatomical drawing. She was looking directly at us all sitting there, and her light made me bring my hand up to shield my eyes. She didn't turn away from our lights at all, or even seem bothered. She had 6 LED lights aimed directly at her face. I said, "Hello." She said, kind of with a pause between every word, something like, "Hello, how are you?" I said something like, "Good, how are you?" And she took even longer pauses and said, "Oh, I'm fine." She then just stood there, still with her hands to her side and facing and staring at us. Her light made it impossible to really see her face, and it was so bright I had my hand up the entire time until she just turned and walked slowly down the trail part that we had just came up. She got to a part where the trail turned, and we saw her light just stay in that one spot for a minute until she turned and the light faded out of sight. We wait for a while before continuing up. I kept making comments about how weird that was, and everyone else just made it out to be me always being afraid. But no one ever came after her. She had done this hike alone, at night, and somehow without being found by any ranger. We got up after a bit and started back up to the top. It felt like it took much longer than it ever had in the past, but we made it to the top. There's stone steps named Fat Man Squeeze that get you to the top of the bridge, and you can walk across it and whatever. Going up and being on the top, we could hear twigs snapping, almost alternating from the left and then the right. We lay down and try to stargaze, but the clouds are even thicker now. It was miserably hot. We could hear voices at times, and my husband kept checking for people we heard. He never saw anyone. We saw a light flash, never saw anyone attached to it, and then we heard a bird call, but it wasn't like a bird noise at all. It sounded like a person making bird calls, like rhythmic and not really natural. I was convinced we weren't alone, and hadn't been alone, but also I'm the most easily spooked. I asked to leave as soon as they were ready to, and they were ready right then and there, and that scared me, that they were just as afraid of me as me at this point. We began going down the way we came, and it felt like it was taking so long. We were going steady and quick, and it was downhill, but we were not making any ground, it seemed. It's hard to explain, but it was so weird that at one point I even said it out loud. I said, "This feels much longer," and they agreed with me. I kept looking behind me with the flashlight, and my husband kept looking out to the sides, and my friend kept hers mostly forward. I kept feeling watched and couldn't figure out what footsteps were ours, or if they were all ours that I heard. I would turn in the direction of any noise, but not see anything. When my husband was walking, he kept saying he was catching eyes in his flashlight. Usually you could catch raccoon eyes spying on you or some animal like that. He was afraid maybe a bear or a big dog or something, and he never got his lights on whatever eyes they were long enough to see an animal size or shape. Now that we're hiking down semi-flattish area compared to the downhill hike we've been doing at least. Let's see. Now we're hiking down a semi-flattish area compared to the downhill hike we'd been doing. The log fence or handrail or whatever it's called is on our right side. We are now walking in a row, walking within reaching distance of this barrier, and my husband just stops walking altogether and says, "What's that?" But the question is more of an alert, and I move my hand lamp to the direction and don't see anything at first. Then both of his lights catch a shape, and then my headlamp catches it, and I move my hand lamp to center and catch it while my friend simultaneously finds it in her lights as well. All 6 lights shine onto and kind of reflect off of a light gray creature. It is bent in a crouching position, kneeling on its right leg, and starts turning towards us. It starts to slowly stand, and my mind is racing still. It looks human, but it is too big. People mistake human shapes for what's actually bears in the woods, often, but this is skinny. It is thin and big and almost white. It's so light gray, and its skin resembles dolphin skin. There's a shine to it, and our lights get reflected a little when they're on it. It gradually comes to a full standing position in front of us. Its head is long, and its eyes are in a human position on the front of its face, and not on the side like animals, but I could not see any other facial features. just big, almost empty holes or pits that were its eyes. It looked directly at us and our lights. The way it stood was intimidating, almost like when a snake raises up and flexes their necks all crazy to show prey that they're stronger and smarter. It was like it was stepping up to a fight, from crouching, then turning, then standing front on in front of us. The arms hung down low, and the hands seemed too long. Its hands had to be by its knees. I'd guess it stood 9 feet or so, and not that far in front of us. No hair at all, and its head was large as well. I couldn't process what I saw and was frozen. Then I just felt my husband hitting me on the back and yelling, "Run, run, run." I start to understand we have to get away from this thing, and it pivots and runs to the right, going backwards on the trail so it could get around the barrier and onto the trail behind us. We take off running the rest of the way down the trail, knowing that this thing just took off much faster than us, and after it had crossed from behind the barrier, it would be gaining on us quick. We didn't talk at all, because when we tried, it felt almost like we would get caught. We kept running as we can, but some areas are so steep, it never felt like we were out of sight from this creature. As we made it to the trail beginning with the gravel, we could hear something to the side crashing down through the forest. We ran until we got to the car, and then we drove as fast as we could. And as soon as we got to the main road, the sky cleared up and the stars were out. When that thing looked at us, I knew it was smarter and faster than us. I knew that if we hadn't have seen it, that it could have easily taken one of us and gotten away. I think the only reason it hesitated was because so many of us saw it at once and we stayed together. When we made it back to where we were staying, all of us took our phones and wrote a note for what we saw happen. We hadn't spoken about it until after we looked at each other's phones and the stories were the same. Without a doubt, we had all seen something real. And there's also some links, and the first link is for a picture-by-picture view of the hike to the top, which I'll share some of these pictures with you guys. And she also has a sketch that she had made of this thing that she seen.
That's crazy.
And it's a pretty creepy looking sketch. I mean, have you done this hike before? I've done the hike several times. Mm-mm. Never at night. And
I've only been there once.
That would be it would be scary anyway to hike there. And I've hiked through Red River Gorge at night.
I mean, it's out there. There's nothing around.
And I guess if you were going to find something scary, I would imagine that, I mean, I've heard other scary stories about that place.
Evidently, there's a lot of strange things there.
But these people, I'm fascinated about the pod people. And I mean, what are the chances that she encounters this girl in a sundress walking? That's very odd.
That's very strange.
And if you go on back to the original story, like what was going on with that group of people, you know, right? It seems like there's something happening at Red River Gorge.
What county is Red River Gorge?
Red River Gorge.
Let me look that up real quick. It wouldn't have to be like Clay, is it?
I was gonna say Lee.
What county?
Lee and Breathitt, maybe.
Okay, so it's actually Stanton.
Stanton. Mhm. I've personally never seen anything crazy at Red River Gorge, but.
So, do you know that there's like a Bermuda Triangle of Kentucky?
I know. I know a lot of places do have those centered activity points. Though.
Right. Well, they say that. Where is it? 3 of the more well-known places include Somerset.
Okay. Yeah, there's some crazy stuff.
Redbird. I'm not sure where that's at. Highway 66. I believe that may be in Clay County. And Maysville.
Okay.
Mhm.
So inside this area, these points.
Yeah, like weird things happen. Evidently, maybe somewhere in Somerset or something, there's some kind of magnetic field or something I'd never really heard about before.
I always kind of wondered if we had a place like that in Kentucky. So
yeah. Evidently, it's pretty large. Evidently, they span from, Somerset to Maysville.
I know one thing I've heard a lot about Somerset is there's a lot of like satanic.
Oh yeah, I read something about that a little bit ago about like hooded figure people like.
I almost wanted to cover that on tonight's podcast because there's so much of that goes on, and it seems like it is enough to cover on an episode. So
probably so.
But yeah, if you guys have any suggestions about what kind of content you'd like to hear us cover, comment and let us know. We'll eventually get around to everything at some point. Right now, I've just been trying to focus on things here in Kentucky where we're located at, but inevitably we're going to have to venture out at some point. And also, if you guys have any information about what maybe happened to that girl at Red River Gorge that night, do the right thing, call the right people. And who knows, maybe it's just a bunch of skinwalkers out there having a good time, right?
Right. I guess.
Or pod people, whatever you want to call them.
Right.
And I'm definitely gonna look more into this pod people thing, because I couldn't find anything about it at all, aside from like the very little bit that I've already gone over with you guys, and that's not a lot of information. And this is all like first-hand information. I mean, if these things exist here in Kentucky, they've got to be other places. They've got to be other stories about it. So, have you guys ever encountered people that you would call pod people? I mean, I know I've went to school with what I think are pod people. No, I don't know. I don't think I've ever encountered what I would consider, something that I guess would be trying to imitate a human form, basically, right?
Yeah.
And doing so poorly. I guess it's kind of a dead giveaway. I don't know. It would be kind of creepy running into a lone hiker with no supplies, you know what I'm saying?
Right. No, that's weird. But
this area, this trail that these people is supposedly having on is a very, very public travel. Like, there's a lot of people.
Yeah.
So the fact that there is somebody there after dark is not necessarily the most alarming part of the story. It does not necessarily mean that the girl was involved, although
it's very weird. What was she doing by herself?
I will say that it's suspicious. I will say that.
Talking strange. I mean, now if she wasn't anything weird, I could see why she would be hesitant to just freely talk, right? Because you're probably a little scared. You're by yourself. You come upon 3 people or 2 or 3, whatever it was. You'd be a little nervous to fully talk.
Right, yeah.
But
exactly.
Maybe
she thought that they were pod people, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They could have been just 2 different parties of paranoid people.
Could have been. But why would she be out there in a sundress? Just walking
and like this person said, she would have been out there with no food or water.
Right. And then made this whole hike. With what kind of shoes did they say?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm having trouble concentrating because somebody is picking at my neck right now. I don't know what that is. Yeah, you have a bad habit about that, don't you?
Oh.
I don't know. Let's see. I'm trying to see if it does say what kind of footwear maybe she had on. I mean, that would have probably caused me to turn around immediately. I don't know if it felt like, off or something. I guess, when you go camping, just keep your eyes and obviously ears open. You want to be on the lookout for any suspect activity clearly there's some stuff going on at Red River Gorge.
Something.
And if you guys have had any encounters down there with anything strange, we definitely want to hear about it.
I want to know.
And if not, maybe you can go down there and camp in your spare time and, report back. Maybe you'll see something while you're there. It's an absolutely beautiful place, and I think we should go camp before the season's out this year.
Yeah, I would like to.
It's just like she was saying, it's an amazing place to look at the stars, if nothing else.
Yeah, I agree.
And there are secluded areas out there.
Yeah.
The trail where she had this encounter with this thing is not the most secluded area, but some of the campsites are out there, so I'm sure whatever kind of cryptids are out there lurking around in the dark, they're out there at the Red River Gorge.
Yep. That's some dense forest.
It's a absolutely beautiful country. If you guys get a chance to make it down there, go down there and check it out. And make sure you hit the subscribe button. We do these podcasts every Saturday night. We actually do them Friday nights, but by the time I edit them and get them uploaded, it'll be Saturday by the time you hear it. And thanks for hanging out with us.
Yeah.
It's been fun, and if you guys have anything else you can tell me about pod people, I'd love to hear it.
Right, me too. I need to know
Or
more.
if you have any stories you'd like us to share at all,
what they are.
contact us. Hill Shadows KY, that's Kentucky, Hill Shadows KY at yahoo.com. We'll share your story, and if I hear anything else, or we hear anything else at all about pod people, we will definitely have that in the next episode. So until then, you guys have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.